Serious now.
Now we get serious.
This meeting is being recorded.
Ooh.
Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Sharon Lee and Steve Miller, and they are science fiction writers, and they have written many, many books, mostly in one universe together. Sharon has also written other books. She's even written mystery books. Yes. So, could you please explain to us, for readers unfamiliar with your work, what it is that you write?
We write space opera. We write action, adventure, and romance.
Okay.
And we have a card.
We,
And our card says,
the Liaden Universe, where honor, wit, and true love are potent weapons against deceit and treachery.
so that's what we write.
Aha. And your card matches your shirt.
My card makes it dress. We're in the clan. We're wearing the clan clothes today.
Right. Right. Okay. So, what do you think draws readers to your kinds of books?
We asked people. We asked people that just a few minutes, well, a few days ago, and they gave such wonderful answers that we harvested some of those answers.
Aha.
We will read you some because these are great things. The well-drawn characters, fascinating cultural encounters, and interesting original plots are what keep me reading, and the witty dialogue keeps me rereading.
And this was, yes, a solicited account, but anybody, it was on Facebook, and anybody who wanted to could answer. And so we weren't forcing them to answer. Things like the mixture of romance, family ties, growth in the sci-fi setting, bring them back over and over again.
And I love the total acceptance of sexual preferences in the universe. Social conventions accommodate such differences most of the time. There are cultures presented with rigid gender roles, but most of the time, any role can be taken by any gender and sexual preference without fanfare. And we had one of the readers of our audiobooks say to us, kind of aggrieved because he's a guy, that we had so many big characters who were female. The security guard is a female, not just some guy. And he was struck by that.
Even bothered.
Even bothered, yes, bothered, a little bothered. Well,
Bothered by it.
Run out of voices.
Bothered by that, huh? Interesting.
Right.
And when we're writing, if we come to a new character, we don't stop and say, this one's got to be male or this one's got to be female. It's the voice that comes out. It's the that comes out, and it's been that way since pretty much the beginning of doing it 30 years ago.
I was just chatting before show of Agent of Change, and in Agent of Change at one point, Valcon and Mary create a diversion, and they're milling around in the lobby with the result of this diversion, and a cop comes up to them, and she starts yelling at them for being in the way and obstructing justice, and I went, okay.
Yep.
Fine.
That's back in book number one. That's it. We didn't even think about it. It was
Okay.
we can go on, but
you
don't have to.
But you don't have to listen to all of this. We just
Okay.
Some people like the vocabulary. Some people like the fact that we do a riff vaguely related to Georgette Heyer, combined with Peter Wimsey, combined with name your favorite space opera person.
the comedy and drama of manners that is Liaden Society. It reminds me of the best of Gilbert and Sullivan plays or Georgette Heyer's Regencies. So
That's why it's called space opera.
Yes,
Yes.
Absolutely. People forget that though. Someone else asked us why is it space opera? And I said, because opera, larger than life, and good versus evil, and all people singing really loud. And it's all of that.
And-
That's why it's space opera and horse opera.
And it was named about the time horse operas were popular in cinema. And a horse opera, of course, was a Western, the big Westerns, and so from that kind of a background.
Right. Could you tell us now a little bit about your universe?
25 books. Let me see.
Yes.
The Liaden Universe is a space opera universe of our own devising. It has galactic trade and aliens. I know that, serious science fiction does not, and this is another reason you can tell it's space opera. I'm told that serious science fiction does not deal with galactic trade because galactic trade would be stupid. So we have all of it. We have traders, we have aliens, we have psychic powers, we have people who fall in love, we have people who have extended families.
And while there's warfare, and one or two of the books has, you see people in combat in war situations, it's not about combat like some space operas are. It's not all about the ships. It's not all about how many nuclear cannons are you carrying or anything like
I
that.
remember when we were at the Chicago Worldcon, whichever one it was, I was getting onto an elevator and two guys were talking, and the one guy said, I just read this great book called Conflict of Honors. And his friend said to him, oh, what's it like? And he said, well, it's like military SF, sort of. And I went, no, it's not. Military SF without wars. And like Conflict of Honors is the story of a woman who has been abandoned by her ship, is taken up by another ship, a trade ship, and she finds her family and her calling. And it's a love story also.
Yes, it is.
But he was struggling to tell his friend what it was like military SF.
Well, yes, because there were people
There were spaceships.
There were spaceships, and there were people in hierarchical positions, and you needed to work through the hierarchy. You needed to become a member of the crew. You needed to do so. It wasn't without some of the
Spaceships in space. I mean.
spaceship. Yeah. It had things that would have been familiar to them from space navies and that kind of stuff, because it was a ship in doing ship things. But it wasn't again, it wasn't war that was central, even though there was some conflict in it.
Conflict.
Okay.
You need conflict in books.
Okay, so what can you tell us about your latest book in this universe?
It's great. This book is terrific. This book,
Salvage Right.
Salvage Right by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller, our 25th novel in the Liaden Universe.
Can you
Salvage
hold it up again, please?
Oh.
You did it, yes. Great, thank you.
Thank you. It's the story of some people who, well, I have to go way back to 2001. In 2001, we published a book called Scout's Progress. And at the top of each chapter, there were little outtakes from research books and stories and news articles and diary entries to kind of set the tone for each of the chapters. And at the top of one of the chapters, a pilot named Jensen Yostellium is writing to his Delman saying he had to leave his ring in earnest at Tensori Light for repairs. And he thinks that his ship is going to be okay until the next, for a jump, right, so that he can reach allies. But that his dome should send, the keeper is a scoundrel, and his dome should send 2 of their clan members with 3 contra to settle the debt and get his ring back. And that was in 2001. And Tensori Light, I really liked that. Tensori Light, it had such a nice name. And 10 years later, we were on the train to Reno, the Reno Worldcon, and I had my little netbook, and I said, that's always bothered me, that I wonder what's going on there. So I
Uh-huh.
a novella called The Space at Tensori Light. And we published that in 2011 through Splendor Universe, and then we published it ourselves as a Pinbeam book. And in 2022, I was supposed to be writing a book.
We were writing contracted books in more or less an order.
Yeah, you understand our contracts say a Liaden book at least 100,000 words long. That's what our contracts say now. So we have a little bit of leeway. I was going to write the sequel to Trader Sleep. But I was bothered. I was bothered by the people on Tensori Light who were, I thought that after I wrote that short story, we had settled Tensori Light, but that turns out not to be the case. In Alliance of Equals, it was revealed that the Lear Institute was trying to capture Tensori Light and subvert it to their nefarious purposes. And I went, oh, really? And then in Alliance of in Neogenesis, it begins to figure even more prominently, and the Space of Tensori Light is actually reprinted at the back of Neogenesis, so we have the whole story.
And yeah, and part of what's going on is that we have, when you've got 25 books already, you've got a bunch of threads going on, because we don't write them necessarily serially, but rather in the universe, so that sometimes you go back and forth a little bit. And some of them actually take place many years before, and so there are a lot of threads that are sitting around looking for that
percolating,
looking for that touch, and
Jensen was after Neogenesis, the people on Tensori Light were in a better place, but they weren't in a good place. And I have, as I have gotten older, gotten this idea that we should leave our characters in a good place, because we may not be around to help them anymore. And the story about Tensori Light and the Light Keepers kind of grabbed onto my head and said, no, you're writing this book here. You're not writing that other book over there. And it was a rush.
Yeah, it was.
But it basically took over the house for 8 months.
There's one question that I have for you. How easy is it for the two of you to write together? I mean, it seems like it's simple, because you just write so many books. But how do you do it together? I mean, what's your story about writing together?
Well, in condensed form, the first time we started collaborating was that when we were in a writing class together, and we didn't even realize we were collaborating. It was sort of us against the world, because we were the older students in the class, and the professor was
Disengaged.
an Iranian intellectual who had come to this country and had been given a sinecure, someplace that he could work in a university. So he was,
while his paperwork and
while the rest of his stuff happened, and so he got given he inherited the creative writing class, and it was us and 17 or 18 very young people who were freshmen and sophomores, and we were in our later 20s. And we both had some experience trying to write things. At least I was published by that time, and so it was
So we would sit together and snark it.
Yeah, we kind of collaborated there, and when we ended up living in the same space, we were both kind of in the opportunity pool, so that sometimes one of us had pickup work, and sometimes somebody else did. So it depended on whoever had called from whatever, what was the name of it? It was
Kelly Services
or whoever. And Sharon got called into.
I was called to be a law secretary.
And so she went in, and sometimes these things only lasted a day or two. she had been writing a story about a wizard, and she was only 2 or 3 pages.
Not even a page, maybe. The page was still
It was in the typewriter because we used,
typewriters. You remember typewriters?
and I went past it 2 or 3 times the first day, and okay, and she came home and was blitzed. She could not possibly write on it.
They had given me to the infant terribles of the firm. They were awful,
And
and
so
they had killed so many secretaries that they just started getting them temps.
and so she went in the second day, and story hadn't moved. So on the third day, she was there, and I went past again and read what was there, and I said to her on the phone, I called
It called me at work,
and said, "Can I finish this? I think I know where it goes."
and I said, you can finish it, but I reserve the right to reject anything you've done. And he said, deal. So that was our first collaboration, was the naming of kindred.
Pardon me. And we both had, again, some background in collaboration anyway. I had some newspaper background. Sharon had worked with ad agencies and stuff, and you get used to people saying, okay, we got to do this.
This is okay, but you can change this, or, you know.
Okay, so we were not uncomfortable with the idea of collaborating. And Sharon came home, looked it over, and she said, well, I think I'd make this, and I'd make this. And we sent it out, and it sold the first place it went to. And
So
who asked if we had any more? So of course we immediately had another one, and
which we had to
etc.
write together because I was still with the lawyers.
Yeah, so that was sort of the start. The continuation was that I was as part of the money making for the house, I was running chess tournaments, and I came home one weekend, and Sharon,
After having run a chess tournament the entire weekend,
yeah,
leaving me alone with a typewriter and a ream of paper.
well, by the time
Dangerous. Dangerous.
By the time I got home, there was not nearly the same amount of paper left. And because Sharon had been working on an idea and working on it, and you didn't just drop a new file, you tore the paper up or you crunched up and threw it into the, and I came home and she said, I think I have a story here. I think I have a novel. And I looked at it and sat down and said, no, I'm afraid you have a series.
And it was one line, which was the man who was not Terence O'Grady had come quietly, the opening line for Agent of Change.
And that's how we really got into doing it.
Hardcore,
Yeah. Wow, that's quite a story. So getting back to Salvage Right, maybe getting back to the entire series, what was the inspiration for your series?
For the series? That would have been my fault. I was kind of a funny looking kid. Nobody tells this story. I was a funny looking kid, and I spent a lot of time by myself. And I talked funny besides looking funny. And I had made up a pair of recurring characters named Balkan and Neri. And Balkan was sometimes a spy, and sometimes he was I don't know, a spy. And Neri was a soldier. And that was very exciting back when I was a kid in the 50s. And they had adventures. And there were also the people who were aliens. I was not very good at telling stories, so whenever Balkan and Neri got themselves into a jam, which they did pretty frequently, that hasn't changed. The green people would come along, and because they were alien, they would do something inscrutable and jump the story to another track, and then I could continue. So that's how I taught myself how to tell stories.
And they were very condensed stories too.
Oh,
I
yes,
should mention, but
none of those were written down. I was just, daydreaming things.
And when we got together, I had been working in part with a startup science fiction publication that didn't last very long, and we had gone to my publisher's house. I was the editor and managing editor, and we'd gone to his house to work on the first issue. There were some things we were trying to fill in. And part of what we were doing was mixing real ads and fake ads. And so we were working on some.
The newspaper was from the metaverse, I think. I think that was was the conceit. So we had real classified ads from real people who were paying for the classified ads, and then we had a whole bunch of made up ads, including a wizard of the wizards who wanted to attempt the staff were supposed to meet. There was a big arena event for them, and the one classified ad was giving all those details.
And there were some related things, and one of the characters that came along, we were telling our stories together while we were writing these ads and doing this. And one of the characters that came along echoed one of my characters from one of my stories, which has still not been published. And there was another one of the characters that.
Yeah, Chuck runs a club, and he needed cat girls and dealers and other people to work in his new club. And so we were talking about that.
And also that referenced our my character, who happened to be an insurance salesman. He was an alien, and his idea of insurance selling was that he made sure you were safe, and if you were not safe, if he needed to eliminate somebody to keep you safe, he would take care of that. That was part of what the insurance was.
Life insurance. He sold life insurance.
He sold life, yes. And so that character sort of drifted into one of the main characters, the background characters of the early.
Yeah, the green people and that character kind of merged to become the Clutch as we know them today.
So it wasn't a single, there was not a single moment of saying, let's write this or let's write that. There were background characters for both of us and background conceits that we wanted to deal with. And a whole lot of it was the idea that there were ongoing galactic type civilizations that were not always just at war with each other, because so many of the previous iterations of space opera were dealing not with civilization, and unless the civilizations were at each other's throats.
The writers who were writing space opera at the time you and I were reading space opera had lived through World War II.
Yeah.
So war would have been very much in their attention span.
Yeah. But it really did sort of become an amalgam as we talked and as we.
And one of the things that we had agreed on when we first started was that, speaking of the old space opera, which was the lone hero, or he gets always said, or the lone hero who has a quirky band, but then he rides off into the sunset. Yeah, that's a nice guy. But we decided that people can't go it alone, that we're better when we help each other. And that in the future, people would still want friends and lovers and teammates, and they would have families and children and stuff. In the Liaden Universe, somebody, maybe not in this fact, somebody said to me at one point that the Liaden Universe is like the Forsyte Saga. It had all this family stuff and things that people are doing that seem to be extraneous, but they're still important to the character. So that we did decide that we were going to do that these were going to be about people. And we've pretty much stuck to that.
Yeah, we've tried to make it work that way, yes.
Mm-hmm. So are you more pantsers, or do you have outlines for your stories?
Well, when we started off,
We had a
Sharon,
book outline.
when I came home that night from my 3-day chess tournament running, and I was kind of blitzed, I said, well, I can use a glass of wine. And we sat down, and having had this piece of paper in front of us with a story idea on it, I think we probably went to bed about 3 or 4 in the morning, and Sharon
I did not do the lawyers in that day.
And what we had done then was scrawled out sort of a vague couple of sheets of paper of maybe 7 books. So if you call that an outline, we started with an outline.
Yes.
If you mean more than that, not too much in the way of outlining.
I tend to write.
Now you do
No, no.
sectional.
I do, yeah, I tend to write now, I'll write 100 pages and then read it over and maybe outline what needs to happen in the next 100 pages. But sometimes the outline is wrong.
But we don't generally start, before the book starts, we don't generally start with an outline. And we've been very lucky in our editors. The first editor that we worked with, after all, got the book that we had already written for Del Rey, and then the next editor got our follow-on, and then we had an editor who came along and bought those books for reprint, and we said, well, we've got some more stories, some more, like 4 more books. He said, I'll take them.
Yeah,
But we didn't have to do that.
No, we were writing for ourselves at that
That
point.
foundational stuff that some people do.
The background to all of that is we sold 3 books to Del Rey and they cut the series off at the knees. And it took us a while, 7 or 10 years, depending on which of us you're talking to get our rights back. But we didn't stop writing books, and we just kept on writing, but they were for us then, which is another reason why they're so quirky.
Yeah, you had a hard time with your publishing, didn't you?
No, we've been actually, in retrospect, we've been very lucky. A lot of the people, this was a Del Rey trick back in the day, where they gave you a 3-book contract, and if you didn't make $10 million, they cut you off. And a bunch of the people in that class with us never came back. It kind of broke them. So it was kind of a cool way to do it, but hey, business.
Yeah,
But we got somebody to pick our books back up. I mean, Misha Merlin was great.
Merlin.
yeah, he called us up on the phone, Mr. Steve Pagel, and he said, I've been Robin Bailey gave me your books to read.
And they're charming.
And I would like to reprint them. And it was during our we're watching a cat trying to do strange, take over the desk here. So if we look distracted, we are. In any case, so Steve Pagel went ahead and he said there were 4 more, and he said, I'll take them.
So he bought 7 books on one contract.
And
4 of them sight unseen.
And so that was luck, and he was pleased.
And we did well for Misha Merlin, and Misha Merlin did well for us until it didn't. Then Bain picked us up. So
and Bain's been good to us too.
Mhm.
And again, we're able to go pretty much where we wish. I want another Liaden book.
yeah, I told her the contract says a Liaden book of 100,000 words, of at least 100,000 words. Okay.
Excuse me. Okay, so in Salvage Right, did you have to do any kind of research?
We had to reread the books ahead, but no, not for,
Not research per se. There's most of our books have a little bit of weird science in them, and a lot of the weird science gets in them because I take about 18 streams of science news, science facts, science ideas, and some since I was a kid. When I was a kid, the idea of plate tectonics was new. It was just getting, and so what happens, and I found that I was like 5 years old and I was reading far above my age level. And since those days, I've always glommed on to new stuff like that. And it kind of intertwines in what we're writing. But that's not the kind of research that's deep research. The deep research might be going back some of our short stories and seeing the names and
reacquainting ourselves with the characters. In Salvage Right, we have an acknowledgements page. And among the acknowledgements, we give to Abby Burgess and Mantinicus Rock Light Station. Mantinicus Rock Light Station is this enormous chunk of granite in the Atlantic Ocean. And it's a huge navigation, was a huge navigation danger. And it had two lights, one on each end. And in between the two lights, it had, again, made out of granite, a keeper's house and farm and whatnot. Nothing grows on it. It is a rock. And the light keeper there was the Burgess family. Mr., his lady wife, who was an invalid, the elder son, Abby, who was at the time of the story I'm about to tell you, was 16, and two little girls. One day, a fine day, a beautiful day on the seas. Brother went out fishing. Dad went into Rockland to get supplies, and a storm blew in. And it blew in hard.
And it blew in long.
And it blew in long, 28 days before anybody could get back out to the island. And Abby is there with her sick mom and her two little sisters and the farm animals, such as they are. And she realizes as the rollers are starting to come in that the house is not going to make it. And she moves them to one of the lighthouses. And she goes running, after she gets them settled, she goes running out and she grabs the chickens and comes running back in and is just getting them situated. And one of her sisters looking out the window says, Abby, a big roller just came in and the house is gone. So for 28 days, they lived on eggs because she had rescued the chicken and a handful of cornmeal. And Abby kept both lights on for that entire time.
And that was the source in some ways.
Well, for Tensori Light, because Tensori Light is a very strange looking place. It's kind of, it's not a beautiful, smooth space station. It's kind of craggy and weird, having been built to a different sensibility and been through a lot.
Yeah.
So that was part of it, but also the sheer guts of this kid to do this impossible thing was kind of what informed Jensen and Loris.
But we didn't go looking for that story. That story is another one of the ones that comes to us.
We happened to have
Wow. Okay. So what was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting out Salvage Right? And how did you overcome the challenge?
keeping up with it.
Well, there were some, we'd had some also personal medical issues going on in and around things that had slowed the arrangements the usual ways. And then Sharon was in recovery sort of from some of those.
Yeah, this is the first novel I was lead on after my cancer. So and it was you know, I didn't do chemo or any of the hard stuff. I just did radiation and a mastectomy, but it really takes it out of you.
And there was several different courses of drugs and stuff, so that when she began working on the book and saying, no, I have this, I have this, I have this, there were some physical things that she had to get through. And then once that was done, the fact that she could concentrate, because for a year or more during her treatment, concentration was not there.
Concentration just didn't happen.
And so since she was concentrating and right on it and being sharper and sharper as time went on.
It was what I said, it was a rush to write it. And it was a book that insisted on being written instead of from the beginning to the end, which is like, I like to do that from the beginning to the end, because then you don't have to go back and build bridges and refurb things that don't fit where you thought they were going to fit. This book demanded to be written in set pieces, in chunks. And I know this chunk, now I know this chunk. Oh, what's this character doing? Now I know this chunk. And then I would have to go back, I would have all these pieces and have to kind of fit them together, because so it was a crossword puzzle and a puzzle.
Now this is like, out of the 25 books, I think we've had 2 or 3 other ones that went together this way. A lot of times they don't. A lot of times it is sort of at least serial action. But in this case, there were scenes that were needed and people that were needed and explications in some cases that were needed. And so it was a different, a slightly different process for us.
Yeah, that must have been quite difficult to try and write when you were. Did you even try to write when you were ill?
No, I couldn't. I wasn't awake enough. I could barely read. I remember when my ray gunners gave me my certificate and sent me home, saying, "Congratulations." I started to walk. I started to walk around the upstairs of the house 3 minutes at a time. And Steve made me a place. We have this capacious house with a very large empty basement, and Steve made me a habit trail so I could start walking in the basement.
Yeah, we moved things around in the basement, and now we both will walk in the basement. We get 25 or 30 minutes of walking in the basement around different things.
Much to the amusement of the cats. But no, after I felt like I was able to write, we had a couple short stories under contract, and Steve was working on a novel. And Jeffrey, you were working on Fair Trade. So I said, I'll take the short stories. It's something we do all the time. Whoever's working on the novel, the other person does the short stories. And I had to reteach myself how to write. It was like, okay, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here. So I tried a couple of things. I retitled stories. And finally got myself back to being able to write stories again and then salvage right.
We're all glad you did. I'm glad that I hope you're feeling much better now.
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay, so what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, Steve is working on Trade Lanes, a Jeffrey book.
I'm working on a Jeffrey book. For the people who are familiar with us, Jeffrey has been threaded off and on for some years now, and he has gone from being a kid whose mom didn't want him on the ship no more. Fair Trade was the most recent there. Okay. And he's gone from a kid whose mom didn't want him on her ship, and so he found in some peril he found himself another ship, and suddenly is thrust into the center of action, of which, you know, his family was a small trade ship out in the boonies, and all of a sudden
now he's the apprentice to a Liaden master trader. Oops.
And all that entails, because the Liadens expect a lot from people, and he's center of a couple of different conflicts in the larger universe now, and that's so that book is in progress. Should be turned in by the end of the year.
And I am lead on a book called Ribbon Dance, which is the sequel to Trader's Leap. That was the book I was supposed to have been writing when we wrote Salvage Right. And that Ribbon Dance is due on Tony's desk, our editor's desk, in August.
Wonderful.
So it will probably be out in 2024.
But there's more. We also have written some other short stories and such that should be coming out over time. One of them is the first Liaden Western, and it's a
Western.
A Western, and that's due out in an anthology next year, I think.
Next October, I think it's called. The anthology is The Last Train Out of Kepler 286 or something like that, by David Boop is the editor.
Yeah, and that was a challenge. It's one of the joys at this point is that people will come up to us and say, I would like a story from you guys. I would like a Liaden story from you guys. And that kind of, we'd had that happen when Mike Resnick was helping Janice Ian put together a bunch of stories for Stars. And the general thing, people were being asked to, just give us a story. And then Janet Ian,
Based on one of her songs.
yeah, based on one of her songs, but pick out a song and do a story. Except that Janice came to us and said, I want you guys to write me a story about this song.
This song, this house. I want you guys to write me a story based on this house because it is one of my favorite songs. So it's like, oh, great, no pressure here.
Yeah, no pressure.
But we have some other, there are contracts.
We're under contract for at least 3 more Liaden novels.
Wow.
And there's also we're about on the cusp of having enough short stories and related things.
To do another. Bain Books has been kindly collecting our short stories into things called Liaden Universe Constellations. And there are 5 of them at this point, all about 100,000 words long. So that they're also novel length. And we're just about ready to have enough to get a 6th, to go to a 6th collection.
Constellation.
So that will be fun.
But we don't have a time, there's not a time scale on that,
It depends on
Okay,
when exclusion rights expire. We will
Wonderful.
also be at Astronomicon in Rochester, New York in October, and at Boston in February.
so yeah, that's those plans are part of what's coming up too.
Wonderful. Okay, now I have questions for you about being writers. I guess I have to ask these individually to each of you. What is your favorite part, Sharon, about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
My favorite part of being a writer is hitting send at the end of the book, because writers are very strange, or at least this writer is very strange, and you manage to commit yourself, because writing a book is a huge undertaking. It's long and exhausting and frustrating in some ways and exhilarating in other ways. And by the time you finish writing a book, you're really tired. And being able to hit send and then say, I never have to do this again, is a feeling like no other.
This is after your editor has worked with you, or?
No. It's when you've submitted the book. It's now on somebody else's desk. It is now Tony's problem. It is not my problem anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, Steve.
It's really hard because for me, a lot of the best moments have happened days, months, years after a story was written. It's knowing that something I've written has been memorized, and the first time this had been remembered, the first time this happened was actually, I went to Clarion West in '73, and among the people who were our mentors were Peter Beagle and Harlan Ellison and Ursula Le Guin. And I had cause in one of my other jobs, I was curator of science fiction for the University of Maryland for a while. And in that job, I had cause to write to Ursula and ask her, gee, do you have any manuscripts or anything like that we might papers that we could use? But she was already well prepared and had been doing that stuff. And so we started into some more correspondence, and she said, and did you ever sell Jean? And Jean was the protagonist of a odd little story I wrote at the workshop. And not only did she, and it wasn't the title of the story, but she remembered my character enough to ask me about it 2.5 years later.
An old friend.
And those kinds of things, and we both have, as a writing unit and individually, had people come up to us. I got to tell you, this is your. I wrote a little story that had a cat in a bag, and the cat is playing with a bag, and he's actually saving the universe because the aliens are trying to come through
The portal.
the portal that's in the bag, and so he's saving the universe. And it was a quickie. I mean, it was a sit down and write it. And, oh boy, I like this. This is fun. And I had a gentleman come up to me and that I had met in brief and in passing, and he'd been sick, and he came up to me. He says, "I have to tell you." He said, "When I was sick, I was reading this story probably once a week. It just makes me feel so good." And
Whatever it takes.
things like that.
We have had people come up to us and say, "Your book saved my life." This particular girl had read Agent of Change, and she was struck down with something I don't even know what it was. Sudden and awful. She was in college, and in the infirmary, and they weren't holding out very much hope for her. And she had finished reading Agent of Change, and her sister came to visit her with Conflict of Honors, the next book.
And said, I recognized the names you've been talking about.
You've been talking about this book. I have another book. Did you know? And she said, "I had to live so that I could read it." Okay, whatever works.
So the favorites, it's great to walk. It's great to go to a convention and have people ask you to sign. It's great. It's a nice feeling. But when they come back to the not only I want it signed but this has really gotten to me.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process, and how do you overcome that?
Writing
So-
is the most challenging part. And you overcome it by sitting down and doing it anyway.
And
Okay.
the biggest challenge over and over again as a writer is getting in the way, getting in the way. Sometimes you get in your own way by saying this sentence isn't right, and that's okay if nothing else happens, so it's not okay. If you just let that sentence be a stopper completely. And
There was something that happened just recently as I'm writing Ribbon Dance. A character had to be introduced, a brand new character had to be introduced. And I know how to introduce characters into novels at this point. But this character I was worried about and waffling and not writing the portion where she needs to come on stage because I didn't know who she was. I didn't know who she was. Where did she come from? What has she done? What did she, I never know any of that stuff unless the character is an old character, has been written. New characters walk on and explain themselves as they go along. But for some reason I had fixated on I can't write this character until I know who she is. And finally I couldn't stall any longer. And there was a big meeting. This is about opening a new trade route. So there's meetings
in the book.
And there was a big meeting, and she's the accountant. She had to be there. So I sort of like picked her up and threw her into the meeting, and there she was. She knew exactly what to do. She knew exactly who to take as an assistant. She knew what the protocols were. She knew all that stuff. She's an accountant. I was getting in my own way, and I know that you don't know everything about your characters when you first meet them, and yet.
I will give the caveat that some people are trained to do that, and
you have to know your character's
you have to know your character's birthday, the color of their eyes, when they have their first kiss and all that stuff, which we have several words that we say about that, and it's basically no. If you do that, I had a very good friend who had 1 or 2 stories published, but he kept foundering because he kept going to these writing programs that would tell him what you have to do is have all this. And I walked into his house and he had butcher block paper, whatever it's called,
butcher paper, brown paper,
down the wall where he was plotting out a novel, and on it were attached all these things about this character's life, his character's this and that and the other. And he had a beautiful, wonderful, interesting wall, but he never got a book out of it.
It was boring.
And
he was
so
bored.
we're not, that's that's a working style that we don't have.
Okay. So, Sharon, what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Having a writing career. Really, not many people get a writing career. We're very, very lucky. And it's been really interesting. By trade and training, I am a secretary. And that's not very interesting usually. So yeah, I like being a writer. That's a grand adventure.
Okay, Steve?
I'm trying to figure. We learned fairly earlier in our joint time together that really we preferred not to have adventures. I remember going off to watch a Star Wars movie and had a flat tire.
Yeah. No, it was a Star Trek movie.
A Star Trek movie. Okay, see that becomes an adventure. We had an adventure. We were along the way. This has been a process. We did not become overnight successes. We were art agents for a number of science fiction artists, and we carried art to science fiction conventions all over the East Coast.
And hung them up in our shows and sold them. And
We showed up at one convention, and they had been apparently a little shy of artists, and we show them. They said, "Dreamsgarth is here. We're saved." Well, that was neat. But we
thank God.
it's there's not I can't say to a single adventure. Otherwise, for actually going to Clarion West was an adventure, and it kind of set me in the whole way, because I'd been a homeboy until then, and I went across country in Baltimore and Owings Mills, and I went across country by bus, 3 days each way, and I don't think I'd ever, outside of family, I'd never been away from home with and my roommates locally, but I'd never traveled any distance at all. Pennsylvania from Maryland, hey, no, I went. So I ended up in Seattle for that, and that was an adventure. And then again, of course, I met all these brilliant people,
life-changing.
and it was life-changing. So that's been one of my favorite adventures, I guess.
Okay. So what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
You had things to say about this?
Either.
Well, the lesson is, and this is going to sound like I'm stealing somebody's thunder, but it ain't over till it's over.
Okay.
It ain't over till it's over. It's one of the difficulties, actually, and I'll take an aside for this. It's one of the difficulties we have dealing with people who want to tell us that the next story we need to write is this, or we didn't cover this properly, or whatever, because we have a lot of stuff up here that we still want to get down on paper, a lot of things that we still, a lot of ideas, and somebody will come in and say, but this person should have done this, and it's not over. The universe is still, our universe is still.
You must have forgotten. Trust me.
Our universe is
still coming.
And at the same time, when you turn a book in, it's not over till it's printed.
Yes. Yes. This is now set in stone.
Yeah.
This is now set in stone. We can't change anything. We can't go back and rewrite it because it would be more convenient had that not happened.
But we've had books that we knew were totally done, come back to us, and the editor came back and said, well, instead you're gonna need to take this character out. It's too many characters. Take this character out and do this and this and this.
This did not happen recently.
Not recently.
And now we know it was because Del Rey was setting us up to cut us loose.
But at the time, and so we ended up with Sharon working day shift at a mill, and me working night shift at a convenience store when we moved to Maine, having to rewrite an entire book in about 3 weeks.
And how we did that is We had a computer, but by that
We
point.
had one
We had
computer.
a computer by that point. Steve would work during the day. He would leave for work. He would leave the file on the screen and I would come in and start typing again.
And take
just
it.
where he left off.
Um,
Not recommended.
no, but again, it wasn't over till it was over, and we sent it in, and fine. Those
They
changes
published it.
those changes were accepted. But when it's over is when the book is published or when the story is published. That's when you're sure. Sharon had a story that, for example, Sharon had a story that she thought was sold that was turned back to her from a feminist magazine because they realized she was living with a man.
No, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. Was it?
It was the one because we'd been writing together.
We had been, right, I had a co-author. It was a singleton story, but because I had a male co-author, they couldn't see the purity of the story. So, there were funny things out there.
Good.
Wow. So Sharon, do you have any have any great lessons that you've learned? It's different.
Lessons that I've learned in writing? No, lessons that I've learned in life. Have as much fun as you can.
Have as much fun as you can.
Mhm.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. So is there any piece of advice you would want to share with other writers that's different from that?
Don't quit your day job. No, I see so many writers that they're like, I'm not a real writer because I have a day job. I'm like, you're paying the rent. Paying the rent. Writers write much better when they have food and lights and cats. Don't short yourself on these things. You're just making it harder for yourself. Make it as easy as possible. If you want to write, you'll write. But do not quit your day job because you want to be a real writer. Anybody who is writing is a real writer.
I'm going to be more prosaic than that in some way and say, take care of your teeth. And that's a serious thing. I knew several writers who have since passed on, who could not afford to take care of the teeth. Is
teeth
what they
killed
said,
them.
and their teeth killed them in effect. Set them up for a series of illnesses. Set them up for because. And I went through a stage where my teeth were very bad, and it took major work to pull me back from illness. I had infections and et cetera, and it took a lot of work, and all that system is part of the entirety of yourself and how you feel about yourself. But it's important otherwise, and I won't
Take care of yourself. Yes.
yeah, basically take care of yourself and understand that putting something off, where like a visit to the doctors. Now I have an implant, a ICD implant, so that if my heart gets too out of rhythm, it'll come back in and put it in rhythm, and it's things like that. But there were times that I would say, I can't pay attention to that. I can't, I'm a little bit of passing this or that, can't pay attention to it. And I've known too many people who didn't pay attention to it until they couldn't, and they're not here. And we've lost them.
And we miss them.
And we miss them as people. So yeah, take your health seriously. So
No, that's very important. I think you're right. I think a lot of people just they say, "Oh, I got to get this done first. I have to do this."
I don't have time for this. As a matter of fact, when they told me I had cancer, the doctor called me up and she said, "No, it's cancer." And I said, "I do not have time for this." And she's like, good, I can work with that.
Yeah, it's very important. Okay, my next question, are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you would recommend that might have helped you with your in your career? And you've mentioned Clarion already, but
yeah, well, I say Clarion West because there are a number of Clarions,
Right.
nowadays.
Right.
two or three at least. And I say Clarion West. Also, we haven't mentioned this, but we both have been variously involved with SIFWA over the years, and that's the Science Fiction Writers of America. And now they've changed it, and now it's the Science Fiction Writers Association, I think.
Yeah, it's the Science Fiction Writers Association.
In order to because it's larger than just the America at this point, and we've gotten assistance there. Partly it's just
Just being able to talk to writers, because writers are writers.
and
And to talk to somebody who understands, damn it, I'm on chapter 3 and the world won't gel. I keep, the characters aren't telling me enough about the world so that I can make this real. And somebody who understands that, I tell that to my sister and she's like, uh-huh.
we had, I would say, for writers, I know some people like to avoid it, but I would say go to science fiction conventions. Go to conventions, even if you're just starting, meet the people, see the programs, see the panels, because you can actually pick up a lot from watching the panelists who know if they know what they're doing, and they'll know better than I can't tell you to go take this method to go from writing short stories to novels or whatever, because all of that has changed since I started. And the methods that work for people, and at one point you needed to win X number of awards before you could possibly think of maybe quitting your job, for example. Well, we hadn't won any major awards when I stopped writing, when I stopped working for somebody else, and I think it was 1996. Yeah, I think I haven't had a real job since 1996.
But you were a publisher of Ruin Small Press.
Yes. So the best advice is to go where the people are who are doing what you want to.
And you want to talk to not only writers but also to readers, because the things that writers want are not always the things that readers want or admire. So it's good to get perspective, and most writers are readers anyway.
True. Okay, now I have questions about you as people, or you as a person. Okay, Sharon, what is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
I was born in the year of a dragon. A year of the dragon. I was born in the year of a dragon, despite which I'm an introvert.
Okay, Steve?
Seriously, I'll give you a serious answer for this one.
I'm serious.
I spent this thing I had mentioned earlier about taking care of yourself. I spent a number of years suffering from fear of the marketplace, agoraphobia, being afraid to go out of the house. I'd had a couple of failures in very important things in my early to middle life, and it hung me up, and I'm past it. I no longer go into panic attacks where I want to go charging down across, get out of the car and run across the road or anything like that. But I had them at one point and found out I could get beyond them. So that's it. It was something that had happened to me, and some few people managed to see it at conventions. I had a famous author come up to me.
Jack.
Yep. I was in the middle of a panic at a convention, and
Jack Haldeman came over. I'm trying to stand there and be supportive, and Jack Haldeman and his wife came over, and he looks at me and says, "What's wrong from a panic attack?" And he went, "Panic attack? Yeah, we get them." And it was like group hug.
it happens to everybody.
It happens to us all. We're all good.
And but I'm not there anymore, and I don't, that's something.
And Jack has left us.
And Jack has left us. But we have, again, it was the things you see, you don't always see what's going on with people, and that was something that many people who knew me had no clue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing how many authors really are introverts or just have really hard time sometimes in crowds and just don't want to, when they go to conventions, they kind of feel they love being with their fans, but they just they're kind of not nervous, but they're very introverted, and they can only be with a lot of people for a short period of time.
Yep, and then you have to go recharge. But
Yeah,
then-
and you have to reach out.
Then you
Yeah,
can come back. It's just
yeah,
learn to-
exactly. But that's what writing is. I mean, it's a very solitary thing. You go and you sit and you're by yourself and
Have
you
you
write.
seen all the people inside of my head?
Excuse me?
Have you seen all these people inside of my head? It is not solitary.
You got you beat me to it.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, you have a lot of people with you in your head. Your characters. Exactly. I mean, but it's very important. It really is, because I've heard so many people say that they're introverts. It's, I'd be rich if I, got money from everyone that said that they were an introvert. So, okay. Next question. This is a really tough one, so you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. Okay. What question do you wish interviewers would ask, and what would your answer be?
I got nothing.
Interviewers have asked me that. It's something that depends on the day of the week, probably, actually, because the process of this house, some days I'm more worried about, is Amazon making things impossible for me, than I am of, am I making things impossible for me? Some days, and I can't tell you if Amazon has ruined publishing or not. That's a question that's been asked. I can't tell you if ebooks are going to fade away. There's not a single overriding thing, I think, at this point that hasn't
Nobody
been
has
asked.
asked us. Yes, we've been doing this a while.
Yeah, we did our first book signing in 1988.
And had an interview with the community newspaper soon after. So that was our first. We've been asked a lot of questions.
Okay. So what is or are your passions when you're not writing? And how do you make time to do the things that you love?
Well, I love to write.
Okay.
And I also love to read. So there's two, and I have cats. I like having cats. I really like having cats. So we have cats.
You have cats?
We do. There's one right there. We have 4 Maine Coon cats.
Oh, wow.
We have
Maine
Trooper,
Coons are gorgeous. What are their names?
Trooper, who is our eldest, and he's about 17 pounds. And then we have Belle, who is next eldest, and Sprite, who had until just recently been the baby. She is the offspring of Trooper and Belle. So we had this little family unit for a while. And we just recently adopted a cousin named Firefly. Firefly will be 3 in August.
Wonderful.
They're
And
all from the same category. They're all from the same category.
do they help or hinder you when you're trying to work?
Well, yes, they know their job.
And that depends. Sometimes Belle insists that she will so have this lap right now, Steve,
And you will not type through her ears.
and things like that. But we have some strange interests, and I say we between us. I mean, we're members of the Lighthouse
Yeah, we go to visit
light-
lighthouse. Maine has lots of lighthouses.
So we
So
visit
that's a good excuse
lighthouses.
for a drive.
And when we go for drives and when we go out of state, we look for them. And we're also members of the
Carousels.
Carousel Association, and we've been to the National Carousel Association main big convention. And
Which is really cool. They go to a carousel dense section, and they travel around to all of the carousels in like Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire,
as an example.
which is
And-
what we attended.
And so you get
So it's like 3 days of carousels and bus trips.
and guided tours, and you get to see, and sometimes you get to see some of the technical things behind. You get to we got
We
to
got to see carvers and painters.
carvers and painters, and the gentleman, there's a wonderful carousel in Boston
Oh, wow. No, that's great.
down
It's
on the Greenway.
down on the Greenway. And usually I have a preference for old wooden carousels. This
Mhm.
carousel is a wood carousel. It's made out of fiberglass. But it is all the animals that can be found is it in the Boston Harbor?
I think it's in the
I think
Boston
they
Harbor.
are in Boston Harbor and around the islands because there was an owl.
Yeah.
So there are turtles and crabs and lobsters and an owl, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful carousel.
And a few years ago, we were guests of honor. When we're guests of honor, we've done this any number of times now. Actually, think about it. On our way to a convention, we can stop and find carousels, and we went to
The Carousel Museum in
yeah,
Connecticut.
we went to the Carousel Museum in Connecticut in one
When we were
trip,
going to Philcon, yeah.
and went on our way to Philcon, and then we were guests of honor in Pittsburgh. And on our way there, we went
On
through.
our way home, because we went home through Niagara Falls. No, it's going through Niagara Falls does not get you to Maine, but that's how we went.
But we drove out past Buffalo, and there were there had been 3 or 4 major carousel museums, major carousel producers out there. And then, so we drove through, I think we saw 15 carousels on our own by going to the various places there. So it's
something to
it's-
be interested in. You
it's
can't just
yeah.
think about
And
your writing.
I mean, I've been a chess player essentially since I was a competitive chess player in high school, and I played a lot. And I was a tournament director for a while. I did that, and right now I occasionally will play online because of the whole plague thing has sort of kept me away from going out again. But chess, the cats, these, and I'm still somewhat of a fan of strange airplanes, which I had since the time I was about 6, and yeah.
Wow.
So nothing major. I won't talk about my clocks. We have
We have wind-up clocks.
we have a few wind-up clocks, some of them older, and they
Good
still
mothers.
work.
Yep, they
Yeah.
work.
Okay. All right. So what does your writing space look like?
My writing space is a converted, a room that was a sunroom. So it is now so it is now my office. I have 6 windows and 2 huge shaped windows in front of me, and I can look out over our backyard, which is full of plants and flowering things.
And sometimes foxes eating
And
them.
sometimes foxes capturing squirrels and other things. There are books behind me. There are books to the left of me. There are books to the right of me. And there's artwork on the walls from our covers. And also artwork not from our covers.
Hey, and what do you have to have with you when you're writing or editing? Do you have to have some certain foods or drinks
No,
or
I usually try to stay hydrated.
coffee?
No, water.
Coffee. Oh,
Coffee.
water.
Water.
No,
Water.
we sort of weaned ourselves of coffee when one of my cardiologists was asking me what was I doing about, did I do caffeine? And I named the amount of Pepsi I was drinking, And I said, and of course, we start off with a couple of cups of coffee in the morning. And he looked at me, he says, and why don't you stop that? So now I have a 7-ounce Pepsi a day. And other than that, I'm mostly drinking
Tea.
tea in the morning and water at the desk. So I don't have to, I have, depending on what style of writing I'm doing right now, where I am in the process, now I listen to some classical music very, very low. Because once I can start recognizing what tune it is, it's too loud because I'm liable to be following the
You've
music.
been
So,
listening to the music and not doing your work.
so
Yeah.
I will do that once in a while. My office is, the house was a small bungalow that was added onto, and then had an addition put on. That, and I'm
So the house
down,
is now U-shaped. I'm here on the U and he's over there.
and my office is down the end of the hall, just past the laundry room. And I have a more or less standard desk, I guess. It's got a couple of computer screens on it. That's got a computer over here. I have bookshelves, and I too have art on my walls. I mean, we've had 25 books, and we've got an awful lot of good covers from our people. And we have prints. We have a few originals, but we also have prints of almost everything. And then when we were art agents, we met quite a few artists, and we have some of those originals on the wall. I have a Kelly Freas thing that he did when I was curator of science fiction, a portrait. We have accumulated. Yes, I have on my wall. One of the things on my wall is a scratchboard piece by Noon Barnes.
Okay.
No, the scratchboard piece is by Colleen Duran. So there's art around. One of the reasons we couldn't possibly work together is that I tend to work with piles, and
I put things away.
and so I'm going to have, if I'm working on something, I may have 5 books over here that I've been into to check things in, right over here and over here, where Sharon will check the book and mostly put it away.
It's crazy.
So how can you, did you often have to go back and refer back to the other books just to make sure that you've got things right?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
But we also have a very active online fandom. And so if one of us is rushing, and this is not original to us, I've seen other authors do it, you put out a scavenger hunt call and you say, what color are Miri's eyes?
Or when did we first see Bishimo mentioned with his name, or
something like that? And someone who has read our books much more often than we have will be able to help us usually.
And it's not infrequent. We've both got a couple thousand Facebook friends, so that it's not infrequent. I just read that. I'm on that page. And there's an additional thing in our favor right now, is that several of the fans have gotten together. There's a 230 or 250 page Liaden wiki online now with a lot of information in it. So if we need to, if I'm searching, I can go in and say spaceships or planets.
Names of spaceships. It's the little things that get to you. Have I named a planet this? Have we named a spaceship this? Did we blow the spaceship up? Did we name that?
Yeah. I think, and so between the wiki and the fans, we're.
So do you find it hard, like, to be in different rooms when you're writing the same book?
No.
How do you do it?
There's chat. And why would I bother him while I was writing a chapter?
Okay. So you switch off chapters? Is that how you do it?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Sometimes. Usually what we do is that one of us, the person who has brought the idea to the table, is the lead for that book if it's decided that we're going to go through with it. And as with Ribbon Dance, I am the lead on Ribbon Dance, and I am writing the first draft with consultation.
Yeah, from time to time, she'll come to me, and I'll come back from out of my office, and over here will be Apollo 3, 6, 10, 12 pages at my spot at supper. We don't always do it that way, but it's frequent, so I can, we can get
We
the
can
feel.
it keeps us honest too, because are you working today or are you playing Wordle all day? So there's a constant in touch. But yeah, that's how we do it. And then the second draft, you say, here, it's yours now.
And it's not always neat and tidy.
Yeah.
That's the big outline.
And we used to be a little more, when we were still learning a lot about the universe, we'd be sitting at the kitchen table and say, well, what about this? And just think out an idea of
Okay.
the kitchen table. And we still will do that sometimes. It's not as, but we have.
I will come back to your office and go, I have an idea.
And we but there is so much background now that the small things are just
They've
there.
been worked out.
Okay. Okay, great. So I just have two more questions for you. Where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And I have to do a plug for Annie's. You can get Steve. You can get you can get the any of the Liaden. I always do this. Books. You can get any of Stephen and Sharon's books at Annie's. If you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else can people find your books?
Uncle Hugo's, Pandemonium, Mysterious Galaxy, Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble.
And if you're into ebooks, you can buy them, but from all the usual suspects, or also directly from Baen Books.
Yeah, you can buy them from Baen. Do you have that little block of stuff that we can put up in the chat?
Can we put this in chat?
Well, that's why I wanted it in. Okay.
We have. That's probably
Aha.
okay. So
Is that good enough to be seen? I'm not sure.
well, chat,
Yeah.
there's no
People can see that.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
And the last question is, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Well, we're on Facebook. That's what this was about.
Yep.
We're on
That was
Twitter.
it.
This is at Bashimo, and I am at Clan Corval
Twitter.
and Twitter. Yeah, on Twitter. And we're on Facebook. There's a Friends of Liad group where people can talk to other people who like the Liaden Universe. And we have a webpage at it's called Welcome to Liad at liadenuniverse.com. And I have a blog kind of at sharonleewriter.com. And we have a Patreon page.
Yes, we do have a Patreon page if you would like to assist in between things, because as we try to explain from time to time when we're dealing with tradespeople, we do not actually have a weekly paycheck.
Yeah.
And we explained to somebody.
We just explained to someone the other day who was talking to me about replacing the windows in my office. No, we get paid twice a year. And he went, what?
Yeah, we probably get paid twice a year. We have occasional short stories and things coming in around the edges, and because of that, the Patreon page has been a very much a help. But and occasionally you'll end up with a sick cat and you weren't expecting it, and you look and well, whoa, okay. But the steadier the Patreon page has helped sort of steady out some of those kinds of odds and ends.
The support there has been very good.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sharon and Steve, for joining us today. And
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
good luck with Salvage Right. And hopefully sometime we will be seeing you in our store, which would be wonderful.
Okay, we have been there 3
Yes.
times, I think, and
Yes.
have enjoyed the visits. But in this season, with the things that we have to get done,
Yeah, well, good.
it'll take a while.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, Sharon Lee, Steve Miller, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.